All right, man. We're rolling. JB Cast.
We're rolling.
First day of winter, is it? Second. 1st of June?
Yeah. I'm just going off what Paul said. Oh, I'm in the wrong microphone. Hello?
Yeah, that's better. Hello?
Hello. I'm just going off what Paul said.
No, it is the first.
It is the first.
Oh, first day of winter.
Lucky I'm here for you guys. So we're talking today about injuries. A big piece of the training puzzle. It's come up personally because I've got an injury at the moment, and I think there's probably always an injury of some sort milling around. T-Bone, maybe give us a little bit of an intro on the injury thing and the tribe, and just it's obviously something we touch on every week, looking over all the members of the tribe and who's got what to deal with and how we keep them in classes and stuff. Give us a little.
Well, we're obsessed with it. So every week we go through a list called the Wounded Warriors, and any coach that has any exposure to a member that's been injured gets to write their name up on the board and what that injury is and how they got it, and then we delve into it a little deeper. We're big on injury prevention, and I think when you're looking at injuries, okay, the first step is to not get injured. And I know that sounds kind of stupid, but it's not necessarily about, okay, I'm just going to avoid everything that could potentially get me injured. It's about building a body that is less likely to get injured or injury proof. And we call it bulletproofing the joint.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, it's interesting that concept, isn't it? Like the thinking about a couple of people that we've worked with, over the years, who are big and strong, and the kind of people that you might look at on the street and think, yeah, they look robust and tough, and then you get them in the gym doing some of the stuff that we do, and they're actually the ones that are more prone to breaking than someone who doesn't look anywhere near as robust.
Yeah, and you can spot it as soon as I feel like
you can.
I can spot it when I see somebody starting to move. You're like, okay, this person is a potential injury hazard. And I think a lot of it comes down to range of motion, and that range of motion, the expression of that range of motion, and the strength throughout that range of motion, and you can see it. And I think you got two, and I mean this is very general, but two sides of the spectrum. You've got like the wet noodle that comes in, it's really, really mobile and just kind of limbers around through their movement patterns, relying on the joint stability to get them from one position to another or to create a shape. And then you have someone on the other side of the spectrum that is just really, really tight, fighting their body through every single pattern. And you can see that working on either side of that spectrum is a dangerous place to be.
So true. Yeah, I mean that's kind of the, in a simplified form, is trying to take those people and bring them more towards the other side, right? To find some kind of balance between the two. That's sort of the goal.
Yeah. Two different bodies, both with a higher injury potential, both with a very different approach to how we would bulletproof them.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, it's interesting that, and I think like that's a big I think that's a massive takeaway right there for individuals, is that the stretching and flexibility and mobility and all these things that we talk about that we do a lot of, that standard kind of person punching some weights out or doing some cardio work at a commercial gym's they're not really thinking about. Those things are super relevant to them because they are that. A lot of that is what helps to bulletproof the body, right? It's not necessarily because you want to be able to do the side splits or be able to do a back bridge. Like if you take those things further, that's what they are. But really, first and foremost, it's like, well, let's build a body that's not going to break.
Yeah, that's right.
I notice a lot of people, and I guess this is just the modern world we live in, but people really get by with having, shitty mechanics because, and when I say shitty mechanics, is in a body that's, performing mechanically, or it is mechanically underperforming. But they get by with it because they're not exposed to things. You know, like you don't have to go hunt for your food. You don't have to go, you know, whatever. You don't have to go build your own house. You just pay someone else to do it. You get in the car, you go to work, that kind of thing. So it's kind of not, people don't know how bad they are. And then oftentimes they get in here, like particularly when they do their foundation workshop, and after the warm up, they're like, fuck.
Big surprise.
Yeah. You see that look in their eyes. They're like a deer in headlights.
Yeah.
And it's fucking cool. It's nice because you want people to have that moment for themselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people know it. I mean, you get someone ask you to go water skiing or let's go rock climbing or let's go for a hike or whatever. I think if you find yourself saying no to these things because there's a lack of confidence behind the ability of your body, then you know that there's work to be done. The problem is, like, you could continue dodging all these things and that list of stuff that you're capable of doing just shrinks and shrinks and shrinks until one day you have to turn around and face everything you've been sweeping under the carpet. Or you can start changing the direction of that and increasing the list of the things that you're capable of doing and becoming a more useful human being. And when someone says, oh, hey, I'm going to go and climb a mountain, and you could turn around to them and say, yeah, I think I'd be capable of doing that. Or, you know, let's practice some, want to do a deep sea diving course or whatever it is, you know.
Yeah.
Being able to expand the repertoire of functions that your body can do physically is a really empowering tool. And I think there's this, like a bit of a myth behind, and I hear it all the time, about maintaining. I don't hear it here in our gym, but I've heard it in many other gyms that I've worked in. And when you sit down with someone, like, okay, what do you want out of your training? And they're like, I just want to maintain. And it's like, there's no such thing. You're either regressing or you're progressing, but nothing stands still.
Yep.
And most of the time when you see somebody who says that to you and you watch the way they move and you're like, in your head you're saying,
you want to maintain that shit?
Yeah, pretty much. You don't have someone who's moving well, who's biomechanically sound, say to you, I just want to maintain what I got.
Yeah.
I'm there.
Yeah.
They're always striving for more, you know, always.
Well, it's interesting because those people who say that, and fuck, a lot of people do say that, they're generally talking about muscle mass, right? It's generally the guy who sees the gym only as a place to put on muscle, and he's been trying to do it for 20 years, and he's like, I just want to maintain the muscle. But he's not aware of all these other variables, you know? It's like a body composition-based thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And if they were a little more educated into the fact that if they could get stronger tendon and ligament, get more mobile, that this would have a direct effect on the amount of muscle mass their body can hold, then they'd probably have a different outlook on their goals and their goal sets, you know?
We've had a couple of people come here, right, who have had that sort of, hey, I really like what you guys are doing. I want to get involved. Looks really cool. I'm also going to keep going to the gym just to do my weights because I it's important to me.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, look, no problem. Like, it's cool. We got weights here too. Don't think that the two things are mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
Like, my body's not the way it is because I go and do some weights there and then I come here and stretch. It's like I just do everything here.
Yeah.
And it's likewise for you and Paulie and our people. It's like, yeah, your body's representative of what you can do. So if you want to put on some muscle and be strong and look limber, then just do those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the 1980s bodybuilding.
It's a complex.
Yeah, it is.
It's a fucking complex. It's like if I step away from doing bicep curls in front of a mirror, somehow my body's just going to deteriorate.
Yeah.
Even though I'm lifting heavier weight here, I'm climbing ropes, I'm pulling up, I'm pushing, I'm stretching my muscle, I'm putting it under much more higher and intense positions than I ever have before. I'm going to get more gains doing the same thing I've done for the last 20 years in front of a mirror where nothing has changed.
Yeah. There's
no logic behind it.
Yeah.
So it has to be some kind of complex, some kind of disorder when you think about it. Like it doesn't seem like there'd be any other like logical answer to it because we get it a lot.
It's a scarcity complex, right?
Yeah.
It's like I built this little bit of muscle about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't fucking care, but I'm not letting it go no matter what.
Yeah.
So, teach me a handstand, great, but just don't take my biceps.
So yeah, training. Well, even we have a very low injury rate in our gym, and most of the people that get injured here usually get injured outside of the gym.
It's true.
And they'll come in after the weekend and they'll be like, "Oh, I've pulled something," or "I've torn something." During in the gym, we get them here and there, but the process once that injury happens, I think. Firstly, the most important thing is if your body is biomechanically sound, your rate of recovery is much faster because of the fact that you can get good blood flow to the areas that need to be fixed, and plus you're in the right community or the right environment to continue to move in ways that around that injury that don't aggravate it, but continue to promote the healing.
Yeah, it's true. That's a massive one, right? Like just doing something with some part of your body that doesn't aggravate the injury necessarily when you're injured will help you recover faster.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, how often do we battle with, you get someone that has, some kind of injury and then they go and see their doctor or they go and see their physio and then they come back and say, "Oh, the doctor told me not to do anything for 2 weeks. I have to put my membership on hold." And you're like, man, like, whatever, you fucking tweaked your knee or you pulled an ab muscle. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's like there's so many things you can be doing. And if we know one thing about like our biology is that when you do nothing, you start to die. Like if you just sit there and you just rest on the couch, like, yeah, don't get me wrong, if you snap your femur, okay. But if it's like, it's a soft tissue injury, it's like, keep moving. Do something and avoid pain. How long have we battled to try and find good specialists that we can refer out to for that, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think even with a snap femur, you have a look at like all of these really like all the horrific accidents where people are breaking spines, and the first thing that they get you doing in the hospital as quickly as they can, it's not necessarily the next day, but as soon as the body's capable, is they start moving it. They get the leg and they pump it and they use the arm and they flip you over so you don't get bed bugs, and it doesn't really matter how dire the injury is. The first thing you must do is get moving as soon as humanly possible. And this is something that we promote every single day in this gym. Without a doubt, I have this conversation every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's fucking hard too, right? Because when you get someone who comes in, like it's that thing. Well, I went to my doctor, the person's university educated, they wear the white coat, and they told me, not to do any exercise. And then it's like, well, is your doctor in good shape? Like, what gym are they training at? Like, what's it look like, And no offense, I've got a lot of doctor friends, but I've never gone to a doctor to tell me, to look after, optimizing my physicality. It's usually for something else. But it's really hard for you then to tell someone, well, look, how about you take a different perspective? Because they're like, oh, the doc told me that though.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, our people, thankfully, they do find that out.
Yeah.
We go, well, let's try this. Let's work a little bit softer for a little while. Let's avoid that, but let's try some things that maybe can help assist in recovery. And fuck, they do. Like, if talking about our wounded warriors, how quick do they turn around, those guys?
Yeah, that list turns around real quick.
Yeah.
So when you let's say you get yourself injured, scenario-wise, because obviously a lot of people, coming into training new, or even just like having a different outlook on what they expect from a physio. Some people just take it as gospel. I mean, it would be fair to say if you're not getting good advice to seek a second opinion. When you're going into, say, a professional practitioner, physio or chiro, whatever the guy is that you're visiting, like what are you expecting from them? If you're looking for the signs of someone who's good at their art?
That's a great question. The first thing I think is a proper conversation with them, so like they sit down and take the time to ask you, if they don't know what you do, then to ask you what you've been doing, and they have some kind of understanding of that. So like I know, you would get this as well, but I know when I go to a health specialist, if they're just a kind of run-of-the-mill individual that's not really exposed to the type of training I do, they just assume that I pump weights. So they're like, well, you're obviously very fit and strong, so, they think that I go to a gym, and they're like, well, let's give the gym a miss for a little while. So that, for me, is a warning sign, because it's like, well, I don't go to the gym that you think I go to, and my training looks nothing like what you think, my training looks like. So, yeah, one, that they seek to understand what you do. And that's like, I try to balance on my hands a couple of times a week, and I do, flexibility work, and I like to wrestle, and they even know what wrestling is and all those things. And then I guess the second thing is that I look for a solution, like I'm looking for them to give me a solution outside of don't do anything. And I feel like that if they tell me don't do anything, that they generally don't know what the problem is, or they just don't understand. Like they're not really that good at their job. And not to say that's not sometimes the solution, but I think generally it's pretty much not.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I mean, let's be realistic about this. You already know what not to do if you're injured. Your fucking body tells you. If you're doing something that's aggravating an injury, that's what pain's called. Now, if you can't register that, then, okay, it's a little bit different, but that's a very special case. What you want from somebody is to tell you what you can do. So what rehabilitative exercise can I do to help promote the healing of my injury? What soft tissue work do I need to get done on this sucker? How long until I'm back to where I was? So I like a practitioner that can tell me, okay, it's going to take... we're going to work probably over the next 6 weeks together. It's going to take about 5 or 6 sessions, and over those sessions you'll implement these movement patterns. You can return back to this style of training after 2 weeks, and in 6 weeks' time you'll be back to doing what you love doing. And if I can get some kind of timeline like that, then I feel like I'm in the right place. And when you have somebody who can tell you that with confidence, then you know that you're dealing with someone with experience and someone who's good at the job.
Yeah, someone who's thoughtful as well.
Yeah.
Right? Not just trying to sort of get you in and get you out.
Yeah, that's
like,
right.
Fuck, how many times you've been to, not to hang shit on them, but it's hard not to, chiros. And there are a lot of good chiros out there, respect to the ones I know and love. But I've
only ever had experience with
the bad ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I fucking know a couple of really good. Shout out Margaret from WA. Love you, girl. But when you go to one and they're like, oh, what's the problem? And you're like, oh, I hurt my back doing, this. And then they're like, cool. Just jump up on the table there and let me get started. And then they crack you in a few different positions. And, it's like you usually feel some kind of relief. But it's like, I think that was just the same manipulation routine they put on everyone that walks through here.
Yeah. Come back in 2 weeks' time, we'll do it again.
Yeah, I've just spent like 7 minutes in this place.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling all right, but I don't feel like there was any conversation or any, no kind of digging to find out. It's the same as the personal trainer that thinks that they can solve everyone's problems with fucking bench presses and deadlifts. It's like, well, you got to kind of look at the individual and get a bit of info, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, finding the right individual for that is tough, and I think that for the big takeaway for general population, the people listening to this, is to really look at it with take it all with a grain of salt, and really kind of don't just believe the first person you see and the first thing they say.
Yeah,
and ask around for referrals, how we have our people.
Always
right?
Ask for a referral.
We're
never
really
just rock
particular.
up to some place. It is not worth it.
Yeah.
Because especially with people that are cracking backs, it can ruin you if you go to the wrong person. There are phonies out there. I know. I have a friend who did exactly that, and his back has been buggered for 10 years now.
Wow.
It's a mess. Yeah.
That's fucked.
Yeah. So referrals really important. referral from a reputable source.
Yeah.
And then the next step from there is, once you've found a good guy, you cannot rely on visiting the physio once a week to heal you. They're going to spend 15 minutes on your injury. The rest comes down to you and what you're doing on a day in and day out basis. Every single day, you have to be working on it. 2 times a day kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, you got to take ownership for the problem, right? Like I know a couple of really good physios in kind of our field, you know, who are in the kind of the movement or the strength kind of scene. And one in particular, he was constantly frustrated because he has these people coming in and they only come to see him when they're injured, and they come in and see him from book an appointment and they just want to be fixed then and there. And he's like, dude, you know, you've been sitting in a shitty position for the last 15 years. You've been not moving for the last 20 years. Like, what we're talking about fixing here is not something that's going to be achieved in this 30-minute appointment. And I need you to do the work that I'm going to give you, and I need you to keep doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
And they're just like, yeah, I'm not going to do it. Just fix me. Or I'll just go get some medicine.
Chuck the Band-Aid on.
Yeah. And he's like, fuck. And he was like constantly jaded about it. And I get it, because it's like, yeah, you know, people don't want to take ownership of whatever their particular problem is, and they want to outsource it, you know?
Yeah.
That's a tough one. You know, that ownership thing's big.
And the rehabilitative exercises are usually pretty dry.
Boring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think...
but the prehab stuff is cool.
Prehab is great.
Prehab is Jungle Brothers.
And also your rehab can be prehab. So I think the way we like to incorporate the rehabilitative work is, okay, how can I integrate this into my training, and what can I be working on and still get that high from the training, still feel like I'm making progress with my injury, and integrate my rehabilitative work into say my strength training that's been manipulated to accommodate my injury. So I think a good example would be where you are at now, or maybe you could give us a little bit of a backstory on it and how you've dealt with what's happened with your wrist.
Yeah, great one. So I maybe 6 weeks ago, I was doing some weightlifting, and it was I had 30 minutes before I was coaching classes. It was a Friday afternoon. I was kind of hustling through, and I'd worked up to something that was pretty heavy, and I wasn't giving it the proper amount of sort of focus, and I tried to adjust part of my technique when I was already at a heavy weight, and I ended up fucking up the rep, and I screwed my hand up. I jarred my hand at the bottom of a clean and wrecked it. In any case, I wrecked it pretty good, and I had to go to Bali the week after and spend 2 weeks there. I was doing a retreat and taking a week off, so had to go and do that, and I couldn't put any weight on my hand. And I got Dave, jiu-jitsu coach Dave, check it out for me. He's got a physiotherapy background. And the consensus was nothing's broken, so it was like, cool, it's okay for you to just go and then sort it out when you come back. But basically, yeah, I got an MRI and I came back, and it turns out I've got a bunch of bone bruising in my hand, in the bones in my hand. So really slow to heal, really sore. It's been sore for like the whole time.
And been in a little sling.
Yeah, well,
for a bit.
Yeah, I've been wearing that kind of brace on it. More so just so I don't try and use it. It just reminds me. And it also lets people... Because in classes I want to demo, and it lets people know that I have an injury, so it's kind of like... Yeah. It's all right for me not to demo, even though I still try and demo and fuck it up. But that's basically what happened. So my training since then, you know, I've not done any handstands. I can't put any weight on the hand, so handstands are out, and any kind of pushing work for the most part is out and has been out. So, you know, all the body weight pushing work I do, handstand push-ups and, you know, whatever, planche work and stuff on the rings and all that kind of fun stuff is out. Up until a week ago, I couldn't do a lot of kind of pulling stuff, so I couldn't really handle a barbell too much and whatever. But what it did was it simplified my training, and it just made me kind of... I sat down and thought, okay, well, what can I do with this? And it's like, well, there's still a shitload of things I can do. So I can still work on all of my lower body flexibility. I can still So I'm chasing front splits, side splits, all those things. I can still work on my back squats. And as a result, my back squats are the strongest they've ever been because I've really kind of focused in on them and I'm giving them more time than I normally would. I'm not doing much grappling, but it's also given me a chance or an opportunity to go back and work on more basic things that I would probably have overlooked if I was training at full capacity, right? So there was a good point. Like you saw me this morning, I was doing my upper body work I was doing chin-ups and some kettlebell presses. I was doing chin-ups and ring rows. So I haven't done just chin-ups on the rings and ring rows for ages because I've been doing more advanced things. But I think it's probably really good for me to just take a bit of time, go back to these basic movements, do more repetitions. I'm still maintaining. I'm still making progress, right? But I'm not aggravating.
So what was the process of going from not being able to use your hand at all to gripping in the bar? What kind of feedback system were you using and what kind of rehabilitative work were you doing between that period?
I was using pain as the indicator. So I would just try things. I'd come in, I'd do, like a lot of wrist rotations, a lot of like opening and closing of the hand, like clenching a fist, trying to pump a bunch of blood in there, a lot of arm swings, shoulder rotations, trying to get blood to the end of the arm down towards the fingers. And then I would give things a go. So I'd like spend a bit of time pressing my hand on the wall, kind of like I'm, trying to load it in a push-up type position, but not with my full body weight. And I was doing diagnostics on myself,
Test and retest.
Yeah. And like, oh, fuck, that's a bit sore today. Okay, I'll avoid that. But, I was like, oh, well, maybe I can do some push-ups on my fists. And I checked that. And I think for the first sort of month, that didn't feel good. But then a couple of weeks ago, I'm like, oh, that feels fine now. So I'm doing that. And I would do it. I would do a few sets. And then I would check it out the next day. How do I feel? Do I feel like I've done any worse to it? And so far, it's been successful. Like I've just progressed and progressed. In addition to that, I've had a bit of dry needling, a little bit of soft tissue work from my physio. Shout out Nick, Active RX in Maruba, and that's been really good. So I guess I've just been hyper aware of it, and I've slowed my training down, and I've taken myself out of really dynamic modes of training because when it gets fast and dynamic, that's when you have less awareness. So that's why I'm not really grappling, but pushing some weights around, taking my time, it's great.
Nice. And did you integrate the stuff that you're doing with like your rotations and that with your heavy work, like your squats and that kind of stuff, or did you break it all up, or just something that how often were you doing it a day?
Oh, that's interesting. I think with the more like the smaller things, the rotations and the clenching and the arm swing stuff, I just sprinkle that in across the day. I don't, I know when I'm going to go downstairs and lift some weights, I will do my warm up and I'll do some of those things, but I just try and do those things as much as I can. So we're talking about it now, and I'm moving my wrist again, and often when I'm sitting there, if I'm watching TV in the evening, I'll just start to rub the hand to get a little bit of blood flow to those areas. So I think it's just about keeping it in the front of my mind, and just making it a bit of an area that I'm really aware of over this period. You've had a similar thing with your, was it your thumb?
Yeah, it was the thumb. Our thumbs, felt my big toe, all those little extremities. But yeah, other injuries and my spine I had problems with. Again, from grappling, and then I've done
a couple of rounds with me, wasn't it?
Whole bunch of and it's something that you deal with, especially with your training 1-to-1. My approach to most injuries, the first step for me is to get some kind of stability back in the area that's injured. So, and that wouldn't necessarily have to be under heavy load, but it would just mean getting an isometric contraction happening there. So let's say it's the foot or the ankle. We'll talk about the ankle because it's a pretty common one, whether it's been rolled or you've kind of pulled it or something, just to be able to have that foot capable of holding stability first. It's a really easy way to get blood to the joint without having to push too much range. And then once the joint starts to engorge, then with blood, then it can start flushing out any of the junk that's been under repair. And then it also allows you to reconnect to the nervous system. So if there is any damage there, it'll start working on repairing those areas too. And a lot of times, if you do pull or tear something, you're stretching the tendon or ligament. To be able to get an isometric contraction back there will help bring some tension back into the joint, which is sometimes overlooked. And then once the tension is there, muscular tension, tendon and ligament tension, then you can start looking at working through range of motion, and then a very similar approach to what you were taking with your swings and your rotations and stuff like that, is just exploring the end range. And a lot of the times you probably lose a bit of that. The body won't want to go to end range, and then over time you start to explore that until you start getting that range back. And then once that range is back, then you start loading that range. So you start moving dynamically and putting some weight into it, and that'll be very, very basic loading patterns. And then that will move into something that's over time a little more dynamic, and then from dynamic to plyometric, and then hopefully back to normal. And however long that process takes, it's usually relative to pain reception, you know?
Yep.
And that's I think is your best form of feedback. It's served us for a very long time, for millennia.
Whether it's in the moment or it's in the days following, right? Because
Yep.
it's not always then.
That's right.
But you got to be aware of it, and you got to hear it.
Yeah.
That's an interesting, like, going off your, like, because you've got a really good system, right? Like, I know the way you manage injuries with our people here, and with yourself and with your clients, it's bulletproof. Like, it's, talking about it now, it's very well thought out, and I think you see it very clearly in a way that other people just don't fathom, right? But an example of, like, not understanding that sort of hierarchy almost of, like, step one, step two, kind of until you're back to full power, is a good example of people screwing that up. Is like when you get, and I got this a lot with jiu-jitsu guys, where they get, an injury. Let's say they tear their meniscus, or no, even better. Let's say they tear a tendon on the knee. So it's a pretty considerable injury. It's like, okay, mechanically you're pretty fucked up now. You've had a bunch of time off. You've lost a bunch of muscle mass. The joint is now weaker. It's less protected. What are we going to do? And when their approach is like, well, I'm resting until, like, it kind of, the pain's gone and whatever, and then I'm just going to go back to jiu-jitsu, but I'm just going to go light. Yeah. And you're like, oh, cool. Yeah. How's that going to work out for you?
A sling.
Yeah. It's like, well, that's completely failing to understand that even if the load, as much as you try to control it, is relatively light, the movement or the combination of movements is still just as dynamic as if you were moving fast or at full speed. So it's like you're actually not really doing, like, you're going straight back into the fire right now. Whereas if you were to scale it back in terms of complexity or dynamicism, is that a word?
Take that as a word.
Yeah, let's go with it. But if you were to dial it back on that front, then you'll go, okay, well, let's get into the gym and let's do some squatting. So we're still using the knee, but we're using it on, like, one plane of motion, and it's very controlled and very formalized. And let's do that for a while, and let's see how it feels. And then let's add load to that. And then, okay, now we can start to maybe challenge it on some different planes of motion. But then you get this dogmatic thing where it's like, oh, I don't do weights. I'm not a gym guy. And it's like, well, it's not about what kind of person you identify with being with. It's about, like, recognizing that your body has certain needs, and maybe what you like doing all the time isn't the thing that's going to fix it.
Yeah, it's true.
That's that's why here I love having our grappling program with everything else that we have, because it's like we know that we're kind of taking care of people on those fronts.
Complementing it.
Yeah, they're not just getting into one thing and then getting that kind of belief that that's their thing, and then getting all the fucking injuries as a result of that. Yeah.
It's also very important to have, I think, when you're dealing with an injury, firstly to feel like you're in a safe enough environment to allow it to explore end range of motion and to push it a little further than you did the week before to get it uncomfortable. And if you don't have complete control of that environment, for instance, if you are on the mat and you have another human that you don't have control over, even if you tell them, hey man, I'm injured, I just want to roll light, you don't really know how that person's mind thinks, how they've interpreted a question. So you'll always be cradling it.
Yeah.
You're always going to be like holding it back. You're going to be building tension in it. You're going to be working around it. And this is something, if you don't rehabilitate that joint back to where it was, and your biomechanics start accommodating what that joint has lost, then the body will make up for that loss of stability and mobility in other areas around it. And this is when you start to create imbalance. And that one injury leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another.
That's the classic, like, I got a knee injury and I just fucked my back up.
Yeah, fucked my back.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hip. Oh, my ankle's gone. Oh, no, my hip, on my right shoulder.
Yeah.
It's all connected, all of it. So if you don't rehabilitate something back to original health or as close as you can possibly get it, there will be adverse effects throughout the body, without a doubt.
Yeah, so true. So true. And I mean, fuck it, I guess the other side of all this is that none of this is easy. Like from a mental perspective, I'm coaching jiu-jitsu 3 times a week or grappling. All I want to do is just roll. You know what I mean? I'm like, I just want to get in and mix it up with the guys. But I'm like, no, I'm going to fuck my hand up even more, and then it's going to lay me off for even longer. But I've been doing it for 10 years, so I have now this perspective. But there's been times in the past where I'm like, yeah, I'll just get back in there, and then you really fuck yourself up, And then it's like, okay, it's then you're spending more money, you're spending more time out of training. Like it's a whole cascade of negative things that comes as a result of that.
So, what other elements can you approach besides rehabilitative exercise, and limiting the amount of exposure that injury has to other activities? How else can you, or what other steps could you take to help promote healing?
I like it. I fucking say that all the time, when you ask me a question. I'm like, yeah, good question.
It's a good question. It's
interesting. You do ask good questions, man. Oh. You're a very thoughtful guy.
Oh, thanks, bro.
Yeah, don't mention. It's like, okay.
Gazing
so
into each other's eyes.
Psst, I love you. But I guess the big ones for me, nutrition's a big part.
Big part.
Right? Like, so eating clean, eating well, making sure you're getting a lot of vegetables, making sure you get a lot of everything, but a lot of protein, a lot of vitamins, minerals, like just generally eating well when you're injured is going to help you. I do firmly believe if you got like soft tissue damage that, keeping your protein up is really handy. Keeping amino acids, even though, those sorts of things, like that's the shit that your connective tissue and your muscles are made out of. So give your body those building blocks, and if it needs it, it's there. And also this idea of, and I'm going to use a word now that I don't truly understand exactly what it is, and I think that some people will be like, yeah, I don't actually know what that means either. Do you know the word I'm going to say?
Oh, shit, no.
Integrity?
I'm in suspense.
Inflammation.
Oh.
Yeah, we want to reduce inflammation. So like inflammation is not a bad thing, right? It's a healing process.
Well, I have someone that I train who's an anaesthetist, and we have this conversation all the time.
What does he say?
Well, we talk about...
I know this guy.
We talk about inflammation and injury management a lot. And continue going on because it's one of those topics that floating around the internet about, and there's so many different ways of dealing with it and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. So I'm really interested to hear your personal approach to inflammation.
Yeah, okay. Well, a couple of things. Like I know it to be a healing process, so it's necessary, right? So say that there's now this idea of not icing not putting ice on swollen joints or swollen tissue, because you want to keep the inflammation there in order to help it repair. So this is going around, and man, fucking I don't know who to believe, to be honest. However, with the inflammation thing, one really good, clear example I get of it, and the number one nutritional thing I do to reduce inflammation is not drink alcohol. And I can tell this instantly because I wear when I'm not in the gym and I'm socializing and I like to be a little bit fashionable, I wear a ring, a silver ring that my girlfriend bought me. And I know that the ring fits pretty comfortably, goes on pretty easily, comes off pretty easily. If I have one drink, it's hard to get the ring off. My joints will swell up within like 10 minutes. Like it's almost instantaneous. And
It's like a wedding ring.
It's not.
That's what happens.
It's not really like a
when
wedding
you
ring.
get married. Just put on and then just start expanding.
The body's like,
oh, fuck.
yeah.
Don't have to hold on to this building anymore.
Let's get some donuts. But it clearly tells me that's like, oh, okay, like this alcohol that I'm drinking, which I drink, a couple of drinks a week, usually on the weekend, and it always feels like a bad idea. But the moment I put it on, my joints start to swell, and I'm like, fuck, that's really interesting. Like, and it's a very small joint, right, of my of that second, that wedding ring finger, but on the other hand. So that kind of gives me this thing where I'm like, all right, alcohol's probably not that good for me because it's making my joints swell up. So I kind of know if I've got, say, and I've had plenty of knee injuries over the years from jiu-jitsu and stuff, if I've got, a bit of a tweak going on, or maybe I tore the meniscus, I'm probably going to want to avoid alcohol over that time because I don't want to just provide more fuel for inflammation. So that's, in simple, that's kind of my practical tip on it. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that's right. And look, if you think about it, it's you're working on repairing something in the body. When you train, you're doing the same thing, a whole bunch of micro damage and creating that cellular disruption. You would say it would be safe to say that the same approach you take to building muscle would be the same, and building strong tendon and ligament would be the same approach you take to rehabilitating a joint. So, good diet, good rest, low stress lifestyle, all this stuff is going to contribute to a faster recovery, without a doubt, and quality movement.
Lots of water, right? You push that one a lot.
Lots and lots of water.
Stay hydrated.
Yeah, stay hydrated. So what is inflammation? What is it?
Fuck, dude. I don't know. Okay, so here's what I know. I know that there is a process of inflammation, cruises around the body and tends to stop off at sites that need repair. And I know this because when I had carpal tunnel syndrome, carpal tunnel symptoms, a few years ago, I would wake up at like 2 a.m. every morning with severe discomfort in my hands, pins and needles, both hands gone to sleep. And the doctor told me, he said, well, yeah, what's happening is during the day you're moving, so this inflammatory thing is cruising around and it's all moving, and then when you sleep, it settles and at a point it stops and it pulls, yeah. And he said that's why you get up. You got to shake your hands out, move around a little bit, and then it gets it moving again and you can sleep. So,
Pulls in the areas that are healing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how what I understand it to be as well. And so if there are areas of damage and you think about tendon or ligament or whatever it is that's been torn, when that starts to rebind, you think of it like a really dodgy sewing job, the scar tissue, which is starting to reform. This builds tighter and the patchwork is not so good a quality. And we lose a little bit of range, and there becomes less it has less hydrative qualities, and then a whole bunch of waste product is produced from the process of that healing. So, in turn, the body's getting fluid into that area, trying to get that shit out. So, I think my next question is, if you are doing your rehab work, when you're doing that, it's like you're lightly tearing this shitty quality scar tissue back to a consistency of something that resembles what it originally was before it was damaged. Is it such a bad thing that once you've done this work, that you wake up that night or the next day and a couple hours after that work, you start getting inflammation again. How do you know when you've pushed that too far, or is this a process is this part of the healing process?
That's a really good point. Yeah, I would say straight up that no, that's not necessarily a bad indication, right?
Yeah, I would agree.
In the same way that you saw after you do some training, that repair is occurring, and right now things aren't great on a cellular level, but when you come up and out of that recovery, you're going to be better and stronger than before.
Yeah.
So
as long as you're doing it right.
Yeah.
You're not jumping on the mats early or jumping back onto the footy field for OzTag when your ankle's still bound up.
Yeah. And I think for most injuries, like for most of what our people get, or most of what the general kind of fitness enthusiast out there is getting, it's like you can go through that that process of trial and error by yourself. And you can and I often say that to people in the gym. They're like, oh, I pulled a little thing. And you're like, tell me more about it. I don't really know. It feels kind of painful, but it's not that bad. And you're like, well, okay, let's just try some things. And let's just go kind of easy. And then let me know how you feel tomorrow morning. And, they might say, oh, it's a little bit sore still. But they'll usually have that intuitive understanding. Yeah, it's a little bit sore, but I kind of feel all right to give it a go again today. And you're like, cool, well, let's do that. And let's keep checking back in with each other, and we're stabbing in the dark a little bit, but we're also collecting all this information and making our decisions based off that. I know obviously okay, if you've torn your hamstring or you've torn your Achilles or something, cool, let's not do any Achilles work for a little while. There are critical things that are kind of straightforward, but those injuries are very rare, aren't they?
They are. And you can still get movement in that joint without putting the muscle under load. Yeah. You can have that leg limp and somebody can be pushing it and pulling it. Obviously, this is working with a specialist, but it's still the same process. You still have to the body's a pump, and the only way you get things in and out is by moving it.
That's right.
And that's it. You can't do it any other way.
Yeah, the vascular system needs muscle contraction, right, to shift that blood out. God damn, this is the deep vein thrombosis thing, right? People sitting on planes, the blood they don't move, the blood pools.
That or playing video games for too long. That's the other one.
Kids are getting that?
Fucking dying at, what's that game? Everyone's put the Warcraft?
Warcraft. Fuck.
Warcraft. Dying at dying at the computer at walk.
I killed you, motherfucker.
For real.
That's heavy. That's so heavy.
What about drugs for inflammation? What's your thoughts about anti-inflammatories?
Look, I think in general you want to try and avoid pharmaceuticals, like if you can. But I got no problem with it if it's an acute thing. I've had plenty. I got Voltaren at home, and I've had plenty of little tweaks before that. I'm like, well, it's not like critical what's happened, but I'm in a lot of discomfort. It's probably going to affect my sleep, so I'm going to pop a couple of these things, and then oftentimes the next day I feel good, and it's like cool. I'm all right with that, Like if it was something that came about from, say, grappling, whereby it can be too hard to put your finger on exactly what happened to cause the injury, and because I have trust that mechanically I'm pretty sound, right? So I'm like, well, I'm hopefully not covering up a major mechanical deficiency. This is a bit of a random occurrence, so I'm gonna utilize this because I want to get back in the game quicker. However, if I was doing that once a month, or if I was doing it every 2 months, that would be a problem. If I moved like shit, then definitely don't do it because there's bigger problems to deal with. Yeah,
that's an interesting topic because that's something that happens. I know that's something that happens regularly with a lot of people where for them to continue doing the activities that they love, they need anti-inflammatories to be able to get themselves through it. So really, in a situation like that, it's a Band-Aid.
It's like
a mask.
Like my mate Burnsy, he used to pop a Nurofen or 2 Nurofens every morning
before work.
He'd wake up, roll over and reach over to his bedside table, 2 Newsies, sip of water every day, and was just like, no, it's fine, man. Nothing about it.
What was the theory behind it?
He was in pain. He had knee problems. He was, training boxing. Sorry to throw you under the bus there, Bones Way. But
His second name and address.
yeah, we'll put a picture of him up in the show notes. Yeah, it was like he just developed a reliance on these things, you know. And
Isn't that interesting?
I mean, fuck, it's kind of like this
Drug.
opioid epidemic in
It's
the
a drug.
States, right? And we probably got it coming here. Well, it's probably here already. But yeah, you're like, oh, I just feel better after I take these 2 little sugary white pills. Why not? They're cheap. Chemist gives them to me. No problem. Government says they're good, you know. Interesting. If you've ever heard Rhonda Patrick, who's on the Joe Rogan podcast a lot, she's interesting. She's full of information. I think she might be a biologist or something along those lines. Or yeah, but she by her definition, you have a drug dependency if you take pharmaceuticals once a month. So she said, like, yeah, if you take, like, she even said for women dealing with period pain and stuff, she said if they're medicating with a pharmaceutical drug every month, that by my definition is you have a dependency on that drug. You're addicted to it. I thought, fuck, that's very interesting, because there'd be heaps of people out there pumping shit every couple of weeks, right?
Oh yeah, and yeah, I guess it's hard to define how much is too much when it comes to taking any kind of drug, but once a month is pretty, like,
It's a lot.
you would think that it's not, but when you think about it, okay, well, there's a pattern forming there,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I think if that's relative to pain, then you have to be able to recognise that you're using it as a masking agent of some form. You're covering up the fact that you're doing something that your body doesn't like. So if you're getting inflammation on a regular occurrence, you've got to ask yourself, okay, is what I'm doing too advanced for me? Is my body not strong enough to deal with this kind of intensity? Am I doing too much of it? Do I need to regress the progressions that I'm on, or do I need to get stronger for the activities that I'm imposing on my body? For instance, if it's a sport or not, you know, go back to the drawing board and start rebuilding a stronger body and taking a little bit of a break from what you're doing to rebuild, and then re-expose that new build back to what you were doing, so you can get more life out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's often, I think that what's important with that too is sometimes understanding what your limitation is now and addressing that systematically. So like say handstands are a really good example. People want to do handstands, which is great, but some people don't have the adequate shoulder mobility or wrist mobility to do it. So it's like, cool, like play around with them, but really you're probably better off just addressing those things now, getting them to a point, and then go for the handstands, because your training will be of a high quality. You'll actually be able to do the techniques sooner, and you're going to be doing it without pain. Whereas if you go the other way, and I think I probably did this in the past when I started, you rush into it and then you get injured. And then you're like, fuck, handstands injured me. Well, no, they didn't. You just went the wrong way about it. You failed to recognize your deficiencies.
Yeah. And you hear that a lot with more like the gymnastic style approach to strength and conditioning. The rings, the muscle up is a perfect example. I hear so many people talking about the muscle up and the bar muscle up. Oh, that's so bad for your shoulders. You know. And
Bad for your shoulders, motherfucker.
Yeah, exactly. Bad for your shoulders, yes. Not necessarily bad for the Olympic gymnast.
Yeah, exactly.
Warm up for them. Well, not
Yeah.
even that. It's just how they get into where they need to be
Yeah.
positioned before they
Doesn't
start
even have
their
a
routine.
name.
Yeah. It's called, get up on the rings.
So true, right?
Yeah.
So tell me, looking back over the years, do you have, I know I do, but do you have like a rate of injury, you know, that you know of? That like every year?
Yeah. I think that's getting less now, as I'm not as bullheaded with my training as I was in my 20s, and I'm managing them better. My quality of training is much better. My knowledge is better. The intensity is lower, but there's still that pattern there and it's probably, I would say, every 4 months something pops up, and then I go through that little period that we just talked about, changing my approach to my training, restructuring my strength training, backing off anything that's highly dynamic, integrating the rehabilitative work, and then come out the other side and then back on track to where I was. But I would say it would be about that.
Every 4 months, was it?
Yeah.
So that's why I'd say like a couple times a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And does it derail you for long? You know, does it put you out in terms of progress?
It's always
looking at a longer
timeline. When it
timeline.
happens, you know. It's always one of the things that gives you the shit, and then you feel sorry for yourself for a little bit, and then once you sit down and do a little bit of planning, you know, and restructuring, and you're back on track, you start to look at the benefits, and you're like, oh, okay. And like you were saying before, with your reconnection with your squatting and your pull-ups, you can turn these things into a really positive attribute, you know.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, and you have to be able to look at, if you want to continue to make progress with your training, you cannot look at an injury as a roadblock. You have to look at, how can this be advantageous to me? How can this make me better at what I do? And also to be able to review and say, why did it happen in the first place?
Yeah. What can I learn from this?
You've got to put your ego aside sometimes with that and think, okay, how did it happen? Why did it happen? How can I stop it from happening again? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, because it's probably the key to unlocking, greater physical development for yourself, right? It's like, oh, you got fucking tight shoulders.
Yeah.
All right, I'll work on shoulder mobility. And then it's like, oh, now all this other stuff's available to me.
Yeah. It can even be an attitude towards your training. Like, how am I going in there like hammer and nail, you know, for the glory? Is this attitude that
CrossFit,
I have
bitch.
to my training getting me fucking injured repetitively, you know?
Just need to get some more weight on that bar.
Fucking attitude. You know?
Yeah.
So that's an important thing, or is it an activity that I'm doing that am I competing at too high a level for me now? You know, is it time to start looking at other avenues? And also, I think a really big thing is, and especially for someone my age, I'm turning 40 this year.
Hey.
Big 40.
Daddy.
And you have to recognize that. You have to recognize that your body is continually changing, and if your training is not evolving, if it's still the same as it was when you were 20 years old, then I can guarantee that it is regressing. Things are going backwards for you.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. I know I've said that about 3 times today.
Well, without a doubt?
Without a doubt.
100%.
Yeah, you have to evolve. Training has to evolve. As you start to age, you don't have to stop. You don't have to stop doing what you're doing. You just have to evolve, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like a discipline.
What got you to where you are now is not what's going to get you to the next level.
No, and I think you could even look at that within a discipline. The way, for instance, the way you rolled when you were, 19, and now that you're like 45, it's going to be different stuff rolling.
That's hard to remember. Yeah, totally. I was like a tornado back then.
Yeah.
I'm still, depending on how weak the person is, sometimes
a willy
I'm still
willy
a tornado. Yeah, that's right. Tumbleweed.
A whirly bird.
But yeah, that's right. It has to evolve.
Yeah.
It has to. And
you're smarter. You're probably spending more time warming up. You're moving differently.
Yeah.
You're probably a little more strategic, a little less risk taking. I'm just guessing
You're right.
But these would be things that I would be thinking about now if I was in your position, and being able to fall back on the experience more and still winning just as many roles, but you're just taking a different strategy,
Yeah, it's totally, you're spot on. And I think it's that idea of not trying to win the workout.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to win the life or the month, or I actually wrote a blog about that this week. This idea of like not trying to win every session. It's like, well, no, you're going to get things are going to derail your training and whatever. Like, hopefully you can look back and say, I won the last month or the last 6 months. That's a win. Doesn't mean every workout was great. Doesn't mean I won every roll or whatever. Whatever my metric for success in a workout is. Like we get that here with our members. Oh, I didn't deadlift tonight. You get this a lot where we're doing strength work, barbell work in particular, because it's very linear, very easy to measure. And usually happens after they've been here for about 18 months, because up until that period, like for the first 18 months,
Big growth.
Yeah, it's just like 2.5 to like 10 kilos extra on the bar every workout. And then you get to a point where it's not happening every workout. And they're like, oh, I fucking didn't lift the same as last week. I'm a bit disappointed in myself. And it's like, well, nice, dude. The honeymoon period's over, and now it's the real training.
Yeah.
And just keep doing it, you know? It's true. Yeah, I think reviewing how you define your successful training, the success in your training is a big part of that. And it's often separating from the ego, like you said.
It is. And bringing a focus in off the quantity and onto the quality.
Yes.
This is where it's at. And I think if you look at anyone that's performing on a really high level, and you don't have to look at Olympic athletes, but you could just look around your own gym, and the people that are aesthetically nicest to look at, whether it's through movement or just standing there, generally have better quality movement. So if you can focus on that quality, they're not the guys lifting the heaviest weight or running the fastest or doing the hardest workout. They're the ones that are moving the best.
Yeah.
The ones that look the nicest when they move.
Yeah, it's so true. There's a lot in that quality, isn't there?
The movement quality is key. And this is also what allows you to continue doing what you love doing, and coming back to the subject, lowering your chances of injury exponentially. Quality movement. Because generally the time you get injured is when your movement quality goes shit.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, mobility sucks.
Yeah.
Body control's not there. Dude, this has been a big chat. I think we could probably do a second part on this at some point.
Yeah.
But I think there's a fuckload of takeaways in there for the people. If there's anyone out there that wants some help, injury-wise, trying to work through something or get a bit of a different opinion on it, just reach out. You got us, junglebrothers.com.
Just go to your local GP.
Go to your local, yeah. My old GP used to smoke cigarettes. He was this chubby guy. Shout out. I won't put the name out there. But just think back. I'm like, fuck, how did I go to that guy when I was a kid, But yeah, if you need help, or even if you're looking for referrals on good people to see for certain issues, hit us up. We'd be happy to help. Thanks, T-Bone.
Right. Thank you, Joey.
Awesome.
Ciao.
Bye, guys.